Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's really a privilege to be here in front of you. So, why am I showing a picture with no water in it, although I say that water should be in all policies? The reason is obvious, as you all know. In these electricity cables or in these textiles or clothes or food that these people are eating, water is everywhere. So water policies should somehow tackle many of these challenges that other sector policies are also dealing with. So my structure of this talk will be very simple. I will first say a few words about SDGs and then about job creation. So the SDGs were elaborated quite comprehensively already in the ministers' interventions and also in the previous excellent talks. So I'm not going to talk very much anymore about SDG 6, but my point is that water is also involved in many of these other goals. So actually, I would say in all of these goals. So for instance, in the poverty reduction, water is involved, definitely. In the renewable energy sector, depends a little bit how we calculate or count these issues. Water is quite important. For instance, if we talk about primary energy production, 96% is either biomass or hydropower globally. So very, very much tied to water. In climate change and climate action, we should appreciate that the hydrological cycle is the key in transmitting energy in the atmosphere and in the biosphere. If you talk about the agriculture goal, it's obvious that water is also very much involved. 70% of all water use is due to agriculture globally. We've been talking about water and jobs. I'm not going to that more. If we talk about life below water, it's obvious that water is the key. And aquatic ecosystems is the key. And I could go on goal by goal, but I'm not going to do it because I think my point is clear already. So water is very much a cross-cutter and interconnector of these SDGs, and the same thing is obvious also if we think about more general societal development and sectoral policies. It's hard to find a policy where water wouldn't have a stake. We copied this approach, water in all policies. Still question mark, but I think we could together think about whether we should launch this kind of approach to highlight and to coordinate water interventions and water policies and water issues in the other sectoral policies. We copied this from the health sector. The health sector, they have the approach health in all policies, which is very, very much used in the World Health Organization and also the European Commission. Now I go to the second part of my talk, jobs. So here I have world's macro regions represented by different colors, and this is not the whole population. This is the population which is in the working age from 1950 to 2100. So quite a long time interval. But you can see one very big interesting growth area, which is the black black area, which is Sub-Saharan Africa, you will see that if we would take Sub-Saharan Africa out from the figures, we wouldn't have a real big growing working age population anymore on this planet. But Africa is a different story. Some regions, like Middle East and North Africa, they also share the same feature, but they are smaller in terms of absolute number. And if you compare, for instance, the red area, which is China, to the black area, which is Africa, you can see that the African working age population will be pretty soon bigger than that of China. And if we go longer in the time frame, we will see that it will be much bigger in a few decades. And in the next 10 years, Africa will have something like 170 million more working age people than today. So if we talk about job creation, Africa will be a challenge, and it will influence us definitely. And if we go further on in time, in the following 10 years, there will be 250 million new working or more working age people in Africa than 10 years before. So I'm asking here, jobs to Africa and how? This will be a big question to this planet. Of course, we have our own unemployment issues and so forth, and we have our own issues in Europe as well, but this is a kind of supermounting all of them, at least in volume. And it's very interesting to compare the populations of Europe, China, and Sub-Saharan Africa. The red line is this year. So we can see that in comparison to African demographic development, Europe and China look pretty modest. And we are very used to the conception that China is a crowded country with lots of people. So how about Africa? It's interesting to see. So Africa is a kind of opportunity, big opportunity, but it's also a big threat in many ways. So how to create jobs? I just took one very classical economic growth model by Robert Solow. I guess many of you know it. So economic growth is a kind of product in a very rough way from capital formation and labor force and the skill of labor force and technology and this kind of stuff. So Africa, I think, has quite a lot of challenge nowadays with capital formation. If we take statistics, there's not too much capital formation in comparison to East Asia and Europe, for instance. And what comes to the capacity of people or capacity of the labor force, they have quite similar problems than with capital formation. So how to make Africa competitive is a big question. And what happens now, Africa gets investment, but it gets investment very much to the primary sector. So water, energy and agriculture. And we are talking about water, food, energy nexus, but in that concept, I think I'm afraid that we lose the economic development in the sense of going up in the value chain, which would be very important for any region. So it seems that Africa somehow accumulating industries and economic activities that are intensive in water use, that are using a lot of water, but creating quite modest added value in a economic sense. So how to change this? One would be to go up in the economic value chain, as I mentioned before. So if we take high-level science, which is a kind of indicator for capabilities of different economies to climb in the value chain. We see that Africa is in a very challenging situation now in comparison to Africa, Europe, or Northern America. So what would be the opportunities for Africa? Since many of you, almost all of you, are dealing with development issues, you must have been thinking these kind of things quite a lot. These are some of my thoughts. So one would be rapid and massive education, and I know that the ministries in Nordic countries are quite aware of that and putting a lot of effort to that. Governance leap, it was touched in many of these talks before. There's a lot of development needed in that regard. Attraction of investment, but there's also quite a big potential for local self-employing frugal development. But what are the risks? Massive emigration, exodus of people, massive poverty problem, slum formation, challenge to state stability. I think they are obvious to you. So what I would like to conclude, water is in almost all policies and developments. It's also either visible or invisible, but it's there, and we as water experts and water policymakers and researchers should somehow maybe put our efforts together and see how we can make this more coordinated and less diverse. So there might be some space for developing of our paradigms, policy paradigms and mindsets. So job creation, another point, is challenging throughout the world, I guess, but I just wanted to highlight Africa to put some concreteness on my talk. So the volume and approaches should be really apprehended. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Varis.